It's a great pleasure to introduce Manuel Horta Ribeiro. Actually, I've never asked if I'm pronouncing that's how you
Yeah,
pronounce
he's
your name.
pretty good. He's really
Okay,
good.
pretty good, thanks.
Yeah.
Manuel is assistant professor of computer science at Princeton. And at PDN, we first got to know Manuel when I believe he was in grad school or maybe a postdoc, and we asked him to brief us on a paper he co-authored on the cross-platform effects of banning extreme groups. And we liked his vibe so much, we asked him to join our library team at Prosocial Design Network, which he did for a bit. And since then, we've reviewed and included in our library at least two more of Manuel's papers. Um, and it's no surprise he's so prolific when it comes to prosocial design research, since in his bio's words, I'm quoting you, Manuel, he likes doing research that tackles real world issues and provides actionable insights. And we thank you for that. And also thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. It's a pleasure. I really believe in PDN's goal, and I think it's super nice to be here.
Thanks. Thanks for saying that. All right, well, let's get to the talk. So we invited people here to talk, focus on one of your recent studies on post guidance, which we view as a pro-social tool. So can you just start us off and talk a little about like, what is post guidance and how do you see it as a pro-social feature?
Yeah, so maybe before even talking about post guidance, and I'll share like this is not really a presentation, like I'll just have this as a conversational thing. But like I'll like basically like it's worth taking a step back and really think about what Reddit is, because post guidance makes a lot of sense in the context of Reddit. In other platforms, it makes way less sense. So one way I like to think about Reddit is that is this kind of digital kingdom, right? Where essentially you have kind of like Reddit, which is the king, you know, and then you have these little fiefdoms, which are subreddits, right? And sometimes like they behave poorly or, like they're abandoned and the Reddit administration goes there and, like cuts them off. But typically, these are the people that kind of like run most of the things on Reddit. So the specific admin moderators or of each individual subreddit, and kind of like everyone else is kind of a peasant, right? So we roam around communities. Like the difference with the real peasants would be that like um, I guess no one is constrained to any fiefdom, right? Like you can move around your spaces and so on. And kind of like the idea is that Reddit has these like very broad rules, but really rules are like subreddit specific. So there's a bunch of communities on Reddit, and each community has its own rules. And really post guidance is this idea of like, hey, can we actually can we actually make a way to provide people with context about subreddits when they write contributions to said subreddit, right? And like this doesn't seem so this doesn't seem so special in many ways. Like Reddit actually has other features that do this, but I would argue it's actually quite cool for a couple of reasons, right? And like so essentially like this GIF shows post guidance, but perhaps this is even an easier way to show it, which is really you can select a regex, so you can select a regular expression. Um, and you can basically tie to a message to the user. And whenever the user creates something, a post that either matches or not matches these rejects, you can simply show that message to the user and you can prevent them from posting. So that's post guidance. That's all post guidance is, right? And kind of like the idea here is that like really like this is a tool for content moderation, but content moderation is not so much like like people throwing stones, but it's kind of like this way of navigating a bunch of trade-offs of whether you care about nurturing versus punishing people, whether you care about ensuring that individual contributions are high quality versus that people contribute a lot, and so on and so forth. And kind of like what I find very neat about post guidance is that it's a way to kind of escape some of those trade-offs. So typically on Reddit you have this kind of like, for instance, you have this gap between automated and manual content moderation. So typically manual content moderation is done by either the mods within each subreddit or by Reddit admins, and it's pretty general. and context aware, but it's not scalable nor fast, right? So it's slow and work intensive. And on the other hand, you have kind of like automated content moderation, which on Reddit is Automod, which is essentially the same things as post guidance, but something that happens after people have posted something. So Automod is a way in which, like you can program specific regexes and specific rule-based like moderation, such that actions are taken if some of those rules are enacted. And in that case, post guidance is quite blunt, but it's super scalable and fast and very community specific. And the whole idea of post guidance is that we are able to kind of bypass some of this trade-off by taking a few steps, right? The first one, and this is not necessarily Reddit specific, is that post guidance is automated content moderation that's community specific, which is not often the case in large online platforms. So if you think about Facebook, for example, most automated content moderation is platform wide. You won't have like a specific group on Facebook having some sort of moderation. And the second one is that there's this notion of proactivity, right? So there's moderation that you take after the action has already been done, and there's the moderation that you take before the action is to be done. And post guidance is proactive rather than reactive, right? And the third one is basically, and this is flipped. I'm sorry. So like the third one is like who takes the moderation decision, right? And typically the moderation decision is taken by the ones in the right-hand side here. This should be flipped. But in post guidance, ultimately the decision is taken by the user. And that's what like kind of like this combination kind of allows us to escape these trade-offs and make something that is scalable because like everyone can like like you can pretty much trigger it in every post. You can make something that is not like super blunt because people will have enough context to kind of like override the rule if they think it's okay, right? Like you're not you're just suggesting something and thus this doesn't burden moderators a great deal. So like that's kind of like the neat idea around post guidance. And even though it's something that like I mean you can very easily describe it as automod before you write things. I think it's something more than that. That would be my pitch.
So that's great. I love this slide and it makes it really clear how I love that we're empowering communities. We're also giving agency to users, and we're being context specific, and proactive. So those are all really great things about post guidance. And now the question is, does it work? So does it actually have the pro-social outcomes that it aims towards? And I know, so you can talk about the tremendous study that you did. I believe it was with 33 subreddits. Do you talk
Yeah.
about that and what you are really what you found in the research?
Yeah, yeah. So basically kind of like that there was this notion of post guidance and we kind of it was hard to unfortunately we did not pre-register it because it was just too hard to do this while collaborating with the design team. But we once the idea of post guidance was set in stone and like how it was going to be implemented, we came up with four hypotheses around it. And I'll continue doing the slide inspired conversation. So the first one was that basically post guidance would increase the number of non-removed contributions, right? So meaning that like once you enable post guidance, people would adapt their contributions such that they would be allowed in the platform. So that would increase the number of contributions. The second one is that it would reduce the workload for mods. The third one is that we would increase the quality of the contributions, right? Because contributions would adhere to standards. And the fourth one that basically maybe post guidance would increase user engagement in the communities adopting it. So basically that once you've been exposed to post guidance, you would be hooked to this community because maybe you would make a successful contribution to it, right? And kind of like we tied each of these hypotheses to a couple of outcomes that we computed on a user level. And the kind of like the way that we ran this study is that we enrolled 33 communities. In the end, we had around 100,000 users enrolled. And the way it worked is that we did user level randomization. So this is something that we did only because this was in collaboration with Reddit, right? So whenever someone first entered the interface to make a post in a community, they were randomized into treatment and control. If they were treated, they would be shown the post guidance rules. If they were in control, they wouldn't, right? So basically, if you go back, to to this, right? So if you were sorted into treatment, if you make a post in Ask Reddit without a question mark, you would get your post would not be able to be posted. But if you were sorted into control, nothing would change. And once you were enrolled, we followed you for 28 days, so 4 weeks, right? After your first enrollment period. So we have for each community, half the users in each condition, right? That's the setup that we have, which was pretty nice for the inference. And kind of like to make things short, we found pretty good evidence for 3 out of the 4 hypotheses that we set up to like investigate. So we found the we basically found that there's like users that are exposed to post guidance have around 6% relative increase in posts. And maybe I can just show you some like like the mechanism by which this happens. So post guidance is like they have this effect of decreasing the amount of times users start and submit posts. But because the posts are removed way less often because they don't break the rules, you actually have an overall increase in the successful posts, which is kind of exactly what we would expect. Um, we also saw a very large decrease from posts removed by automods and from reports. And we make the argument in the paper that this means that kind of like this is actually reducing moderator workload because uh, given that automod is very blunt, you kind of have to go through everything that automod caught and see if there isn't any false negatives there. And also reports, you would have to look at the reports. And kind of like the posts that are made with post guidance are much more commented, more viewed, more upvoted than those that are not. So this also seems promising in that regard, in the sense that, like posts are actually super successful. Interestingly enough, like we didn't find increased user engagement over the 28-day period. So users don't contribute more, don't vote more, and don't remain more active because their post is post because their post is because they're exposed by post guidance. Um, which we found surprising, but like yeah. So I don't have like a clear reason why it doesn't, but I would expect it does. So that's kind of like what we found, which I think like it's a pretty the results ended up being very sharp because we had a very sharp way of experimenting with them over kind of a long period of time.
Um, yeah, it's really nice to see pretty results like this. And even though the the engagement result wasn't positive, it's great that you had it in there. And I guess assuming it was like null, the engagement didn't go down. It just didn't really
Yeah,
change.
that's fair.
That yeah, PDN, we said like that's good news because if we're trying to sell these prosocial design uh, to designs to platforms, and by sell I mean convince them to use them, adopt them, letting them know that they're not going to lose engagement is a plus in our view. So good news all around. So I'm going to ask yeah, we only have about 5 more minutes before I want to open it up to Q&A. And so I have 2 questions. You can talk a little bit about both, but one, this is a collaborative study with 33 subreddits. I've done some collaborative research with online communities. It's a lot, and it has a lot of challenges. And so you're one of the few that's able to produce like a lot of these successful collaborations. So if you have any kind of like insights on what makes a successful collaboration, but please share them. And then also if you want to tell us about any other projects that you're up to in the pro-social realm. And
Yeah.
folks, will open it up for Q&A in about 4 or 5 minutes. So start thinking about what you're interested in. No, and I see great people are already putting questions in the chat.
So, in terms of kind of like actually interacting the communities, I must say that like this was really like the real challenge here was kind of like collaborating with Reddit. So Reddit already has kind of like dedicated staff and people that work with the communities. So in that case, like I actually had very little role in like getting the communities to buy in. This was Reddit's kind of uh, merit, right? So like they do have this infrastructure to collaborate with the subreddits to test new features. Kind of like more broadly, like I think that there's kind of like four things that I've done a couple of these collaborations now, and I've tried to boil the advice as much as I can to other people. Like I think that to make this kind of paperwork, like the most important thing is to have a champion inside the company. So to have someone inside the company who truly cares about things. In this case, this champion was Sanjay, right? Clearly. So, I mean, it's very, very hard to push things through if you don't have someone to navigate you through the ins and outs and the politics and so on. So, like, it's really important to kind of like get strong buy-in from someone. The second thing is like, and this project is a good example of this, is that you really need to go with the flow. So like in companies, this like things change all the time. Their priorities change, especially in tech companies, right? Like there's this new thing and everyone wants to do the new thing. So it's very hard for you, for instance, to get dedicated engineering time. So like you always you don't I think you have to be very kind of like humble and instead of like trying to come up with your formed idea, you have to look at the key things that the company is already doing and what is the closest one to something that you already do, and can you piggyback on that? So you should really piggyback on things that the companies are already doing and trying to get value out of this rather than like trying to start something from scratch. Because then ultimately you won't have buying, right? The third one is like kind of similar to this, but like the moment you decided to piggyback on something, if you actually if you're actually helpful to them, it goes a long way. So, like for instance, in this project here, I was doing the experimenting for them. I was doing the analysis and so on. And like they didn't have a data scientist, so I took the role of a data scientist. And there was some sense in which like people knew that, come on, I was doing this work, so they might as well help me, right? And the other thing is like in many cases, people in like you have other people that will want to be included. These people may not be your champion. For instance, Andrew, who's another author in the paper, was a software engineer that was pretty heavily involved and was like finding the whole thing a lot of fun. And try as hard as you can to include these people in whatever you do, because this increases their motivation to work with you and to do this. So this would be kind of like my general advice to how to make this work. It's a bit random, right? Like, and you can have failed. Like sometimes you can fail. Like I failed another project before that one, for example. We for like technical reasons, like it didn't work out. But you just repeat, right? Like once you it doesn't work. So in terms of the kind of like future work, right now, like I just started as a PI and I realized that like I feel that I'm doing nothing for the last couple of months, but I'm trying to start a lot of projects around building like new things, right? So my take now is that kind of as a PhD student and as an individual contributor, kind of this kind of work is scalable, and I hope that I can get like my PhD students to intern at companies and to be contractors to continue doing this kind of work. But at the same time, I don't think that this should be the only way in which we can get evidence for our pro-social design interventions, right? So basically, kind of one thing I'm excited about is like trying to come up with um, new ways of like creating these tools in a way that piggyback on existing company infrastructure. So I can this will definitely not work, but I can like for instance, one thing I'm very excited about now is that Blue Sky allows you to do everything. So we're trying to, for instance, build some feed curation things with Blue Sky, and if I don't fail miserably, I'll show you a demo. Um, so for example, like we're making this we're making this kind of like feed builder for Blue Sky, which is LLM based. And the idea here, for instance, is that you have your Blue Sky handle, uh, like you use your Blue Sky handle, and here, you need to create a password. Just stop sharing for a second. So you need to create a Blue Sky password. Then, for instance, like right now, what we're doing is that the idea here is that, like typically feeds are built on some sort of explicit feedback. What if we could build feeds on specifically classifiers that I customly create, right? So these are, for instance, things that this is work with Andres Monroy as well, who's here at Princeton. For example, these are things that I inferred from my feed that are things that I definitely want to see. These are a bit standard, but like these are things that I may not want to see on Blue Sky. And can I just create a new feed from this, and like have this kind of like feed builder experience that transcends what I want or what I don't want. So I think that's the kind of work that I'm excited about on the prosocial space. Another thing that I'm excited about is like trying to do these kind of like interventions in a way that don't rely on the platform. So setting up data donation pipelines and panels such that I can continuously look at that. And I have some projects about this as well. So like this, I think this will fail, but like for instance, like this ends up generating a feed for you here that basically curates based on those feeds. And then everything is kind of like LLM based. So you can just come here and update your preferences and regenerate that feed, right? So that's kind of like the vision for this kind of work.
Absolutely amazing. We're gonna switch over to the Q&A, as I said, in a second. But just want to say, I really like your lessons learned from collaboration, and they kind of echo a lot of things that I've learned from other folks and come across, finding the liaison, getting buy-in, creating value. So that was exciting to hear, and everything else you're working on, super exciting. So we will stop the recording now.